So, how do you actually know that what you believe is true? I mean, really think about that for a second. How do you know for sure that the medicine your doctor gives you works, or that gravity is always going to pull things down? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to explore how humanity broke out of a massive 2,000-year intellectual echo chamber, using a completely new tool for human thought. You see, today, we test things, we measure, we run studies. But for most of human history, that just wasn't the case. Knowledge was completely stagnant, and to change that, one man had to completely rewrite the rules of human logic.
For literally centuries, humanity was terrified to look past ancient Greek texts. The prevailing vibe of the intellectual world was ne plus ultra, which basically means nothing further beyond. They honestly believed ancient philosophers like Aristotle had already discovered everything worth knowing. There was nothing left to find. But in 1620, an English philosopher and politician named Francis Bacon published a book called Novum Organum, and he demanded we set sail way past those known boundaries. In fact, if you look at the original cover of his book, you'll notice a ship boldly sailing past the mythical Pillars of Hercules. Bacon changed that old motto to plus ultra, further beyond. He argued that we absolutely have to explore the unknown because, as he famously said, knowledge is power.
All right, starting with section 1, the mental cage and the old way of thinking. Okay, picture this. It's the year 1500. If you wanted to know why water boils, you didn't do a real-world experiment, and you definitely didn't go to a laboratory. You just blindly trusted whatever Aristotle had written 2 millennia ago. And if your real-world observations disagreed with Aristotle, well, scholars just assumed your eyes were playing tricks on you. Bacon realized the intellectual world was totally paralyzed by 3 main traps. He called out delicate learning, where people cared way more about beautiful Latin phrasing than actual hard facts. Then there was contentious learning. This is where philosophers would sit in rooms for hours debating useless abstracts, stuff like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, without ever testing anything in the real world. And finally, fantastic learning, which was basically just fake, magical science like alchemy. It was full of wild promises, but had absolutely zero repeatable evidence. Let's dive into the underlying engine of all that bad science, Aristotle's deductive logic, specifically this classic Socrates syllogism. Step 1, all humans are mortal. Step 2, Socrates is a human. Step 3, Socrates is mortal. Now, it sounds perfectly logical, right? But Bacon pointed out a massive flaw here. It doesn't teach you anything new because the conclusion is already hidden in the very first step. If your major premise is wrong, like say if you falsely believe heavy objects fall faster than light ones, your perfect logic just builds a massive tower of fake knowledge. Moving on to section 2, the 4 idols, and how your brain lies. Bacon basically argued that our minds are not these clean, flat mirrors that reflect reality perfectly. They are warped, curved mirrors that distort the light. He called these deep mental biases idols. The first trap is the idol of the tribe. These are the biological bugs we all share just by being human. Because of our nervous systems, we naturally see patterns where none actually exist, like seeing faces in the clouds or thinking a roulette table is somehow hot. What's crazy is that Bacon described confirmation bias 350 years before psychologists even named it. He noted that we heavily favor facts that confirm what we already wishfully believe, and we completely ignore any data that proves us wrong. Next up is the idol of the cave. Think of this as your own personal echo chamber. This is shaped by your distinct upbringing, the specific books you read, and your career focus. Bacon used the example of an ancient philosopher who studied magnets and became so obsessed he tried to explain the entire universe as just one giant magnetic force. As the saying goes, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. Today, this perfectly describes how personalized algorithms craft entirely separate realities for neighbors living on the exact same street. Then we have the third one, which Bacon actually thought was the most dangerous, the idol of the marketplace. This happens when the sloppy, vague use of words and language creates entirely false arguments. You see, words were created by ordinary people for everyday life. They weren't made for rigorous scientific investigation. These vague words trick us into endless, pointless internet battles over terms like freedom or toxic. We literally spend hours arguing over things that don't even have a shared definition. And finally, the idol of the theater. This represents those grand, fake ideological systems. Bacon called them theaters because these dogmatic philosophical or political systems create these artificial, fictional plays. They look super structured and convincing on a stage, but they have zero connection to real life.
They essentially demand that you accept a whole package deal of beliefs without ever testing the individual facts against real-world evidence.
All right, section 3, the inductive engine, which is Bacon's new method. So now that our minds are wiped clean of those 4 idols, we can actually look at Bacon's step-by-step solution for discovering brand new scientific facts, rather than just endlessly rearranging the old ones. He explicitly replaced top-down dogmatic logic with bottom-up inductive logic. The old way started at the top with a massive assumption and worked its way down. But Bacon's way? It starts at the very bottom with raw, meticulous, real-world data and slowly climbs up the ladder to universal laws. He heavily warned us to never jump straight from a few raw observations to a universal law. I mean, you can't just see 3 white swans and instantly declare every single swan in the universe is white. You have to climb step by step.
I absolutely love this next part. Bacon categorized thinkers throughout history using insects to illustrate his ideal scientist. First, you have the ants. They blindly pile up raw data, but never process it into a bigger picture. Then you have the spiders. They spin these delicate, beautiful theories entirely out of their own heads with absolutely no real-world substance. But Bacon? He urged us to be bees. The bee takes the middle path. It gathers real-world nectar from the outside, but then digests and transforms it into useful truth. Isn't that just a perfect way to look at learning?
To see how this actually works in practice, let's look at how Bacon investigated the nature of heat using his 3 tables of investigation. First, he made a table of presence, listing everywhere heat was present, no matter how weird, like the sun, living bodies, and even fermenting horse manure. Then he famously introduced the concept of a control group in his table of absence, finding a twin for the first table. For example, sunlight is hot, but moonlight is cold. Finally, he made a table of degrees, observing how heat changes, like gentle rubbing versus intense friction.
By systematically crossing off the false causes using those tables, Bacon reached what he playfully called the first vintage. By realizing light didn't cause heat, because again, moonlight is cold, he eliminated false variables. And get this, he correctly deduced in 1620, way before microscopes or modern thermodynamics were even a thing, that heat is simply the rapid, microscopic motion of tiny internal particles. He derived a core principle of modern kinetic theory purely through this logical engine. Incredible, right? He also came up with special data observations, including the crucial experiment for when you hit a fork in the road between 2 competing theories. Imagine hypothesis A says gravity is magnetism, and hypothesis B says mass seeks the center of the universe. Bacon said you run a crucial experiment. Take a pendulum clock and a spring clock down a mine shaft. The different altitudes will change the pendulum, but not the spring. This instantly destroys one hypothesis while confirming the other. This very concept was actually used later by Isaac Newton. Now, Bacon's dedication to this empirical method was absolute. In fact, his dedication was so extreme, he literally died from pneumonia after enthusiastically stuffing a chicken with snow with his bare hands just to test if cold could preserve meat. Okay, maybe not the smartest way to go, but his legacy definitely lived on. In 1660, his blueprint birthed the Royal Society of London, and they adopted a motto that was pure Francis Bacon, nullius in verba. Take nobody's word for it, test it, measure it, prove it. Now, to keep things completely objective in this explainer, we do have to point out that Bacon wasn't perfect. Later philosophers noted a few major limitations. First, he largely missed how absolutely crucial mathematics would be to physics. He focused mostly on physical qualities. Second, a purely hypothesis-free induction is nearly impossible in practice. You can't just collect data without some working question, or you'll just end up counting blades of grass forever. And finally, as Karl Popper later realized, science actually advances by trying to falsify or disprove theories, not just confirm them.
Okay, our final section, Section 4, Bacon in the 21st century and its relevance today.
So, you may be sitting there wondering, why on earth does a 400-year-old Latin book matter to us right now in our modern digital age of rapid technological change? Well, because whether we are defending ourselves against tribal deepfakes or avoiding algorithmic caves, the principles remain exactly the same. When an AI neural network analyzes millions of medical scans to detect cancer patterns that human doctors miss, what is it actually doing? It is simply running Bacon's tables of presence, absence, and degrees on a massive terabyte scale. This book is not dusty history. It is an active, living defense system for your mind. Francis Bacon literally gave humanity the tools to sail past the pillars of ignorance and out into an endless ocean of empirical discovery. He taught us that knowledge isn't a museum to be guarded. It's a frontier to be explored. But now, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to ask yourself as you navigate today's world.
which of the four idols rules your mind?
Please like and subscribe.